Hi, I'm Andrew Fisher. Welcome to the Incredible Confidence Podcast, where you can learn valuable life skills like how to find the courage to explore your individual identity in a complex social world, how to be a more confident person, and how to gain the clarity it takes to focus on your goals and start getting what you want out of life. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. This episode is going to be about growth. I want to talk about how it is that a person can go from living one way to going through a growth period and changing the way that they behave. Now, self-help is a huge industry, and motivational content is out there that with the assumption that if you pay attention to this motivational content and you read these self-help books, you can go from where you are to where you want to be. You go through this self-help process, you go through this growth process, and eventually you come out the other side with some new skills or a new way of life that's better than it was before. But does that actually work? I think that usually it doesn't. In fact, I think that's why self-help books are so popular while that motivational material is out there. Because if it worked, you'd read one book and then you hopefully wouldn't need any more content like that. You'd go to one motivational seminar and you'd be done. You'd be motivated. But that's not how it works. You kind of get hooked into this cycle where over and over you're consuming this material and hopefully changing. You get this you build up all this hope that you're going to change, but then you don't really change. So why is that? What is it about change that's so difficult? I think a lot of people talk about the reason being that it's just hard to do. It's hard to change. You get in a rut and you get stuck and you just kind of form all these habits. And so you never actually end up changing because you're used to living one way. But I think that's a little bit misleading and actually kind of insulting because it's assuming that we're just lazy. And, if you weren't so lazy, you could change and grow and be a better person. But I don't think that's it. I think the real problem is that all that motivational material, all those, conferences that we go to and books that we read, they're not really changing anything. They're just sort of an exposure to new ideas, but they're not actually changing our brain. If you think about the way that the brain works, it's all these connections, literal connections inside your head between all these synapses and your thoughts are, run along these connections, and to change them, you literally have to rewire your brain. The connections need to move around and change. And that doesn't happen by just watching a video or going to a conference. So how does it happen? How is it that you can change your brain so that you start behaving differently? I've thought about this a lot. I've spent years and years working on myself and trying to be a better person, trying to work on my insecurity and, gain confidence and learn how to be a more social person and learn how to focus on my goals more and so I can accomplish what I want in life. So I'm very familiar with the difficulties that you run into when you're trying to do this kind of stuff. So what I've figured out is that in order to change, we need to have something happen to us that changes our experience. In fact, not only does our experience need to change, but our understanding of what that experience means needs to change. So it's kind of like a combination of things. Let me give you an example. Let's say I move to a new town and I want to go on a bike ride. So I get on my bike and I ride through town and I end up getting hit by a car. Luckily, I survive, but I'm kind of traumatized. I mean, here I was just riding my bike around and I get hit by a car and wow, what a crazy experience. You know, I recover and I'm finally okay and start riding my bike again, but I'm a little bit more wary, of course, because I'm worried that, you know, it's random, but I could get hit. Now let's take that same experience and give it a little bit more context. Let's say that before I go on the bike ride, one of my new friends in the area tells me, you gotta watch out because the drivers around here are crazy. They'll just run into you if you're riding your bike and they don't care. So now I'm riding my bike and I get hit. Same experience. But this time I have sort of some assumptions about what that experience means. Now I'm thinking about, wow, this town is full of idiots who just run over you with no thought about what's going to happen. Now, in one scenario, I get hit, and I just think it's this random thing that could have happened anywhere. But in the other scenario, I have this context in which to put that experience. So now I'm like, oh, okay, I got hit because all the people around here are idiots and don't know how to drive. That's going to change how I act from then on. Because in one experience, it was just a random thing that happened. And so I might not actually change anything that I do at all, except maybe, ride a little bit more cautiously. In the second scenario, maybe I'd stop riding. I mean, I think that, well, all the drivers are like this and I don't want to get hit again, so I better not ride my bike anymore. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that your experience and what you understand that experience to mean both matter. So when it comes to self-help and it comes to, self-growth and becoming the person that you want to be and learning to focus on what it is that you want in life and so you can get it. When it comes to all that stuff, how can you induce a kind of growth experience? How can you make all that happen for yourself? Now, I don't think it's quite as simple as going into a motivational conference or reading a book about self-help. I don't think it's that simple. I think that we need to understand that our brains, in order to change them, they literally need to rewire, which requires a change in experience, and also it requires an understanding of what that change means. Nobody ever really talks about this. I've never heard anyone say anything about there being a combination effect between your expectation and your experience and how that plays into how you grow and change as a person. Usually, I think the assumption is that you can just read a book and change your mind on your own. But changing your mind sounds simple. I mean, it's like, well, all I have to do is just choose different thoughts. But the thoughts that you have literally are relying on the neural pathways that exist inside your brain that are physically in a location where they've built themselves up into that structure. It's not like they can just suddenly be in a different place. You have to begin to grow new pathways inside your brain. And that takes time. So, how do you do it? How do you change on your own if you want to? If you've got the desire to change, how can you do it? How can we learn and grow and become different people? Now, the first thing that I want to say about that is you don't really need to be a different person. You don't need to change who you are. I know it's really common to hear that what you need to do in order to be successful in life or in order to be happy is you need to either implement these steps into your life and change your behavior, or you need to change your thinking and have different thoughts. But I don't think that's true. I mean, first of all, as I've kind of just explained, it's kind of impossible to change yourself, at least without taking time to do that. So no, you don't need to change who you are. You are already who who you need to be to end up where you're going to end up. In fact, you can't do anything about it. You're already the person that you need to be right now in order to get where you're going. You can't change from who you are except through time, and that's inevitable anyway. So, what you can do though is you can gain some context that helps explain the experiences that you've already had and the experiences that you will have in the future in a way that causes you to make decisions that are healthier, or that push you further towards where you want to be. You can change your expectations by gaining new context. So me saying this is actually part of that. Just understanding that you need context in order for your experiences to help change you. Understanding that concept, I think, kind of is a very foundational, really basic start to this whole process. It's important that you at least understand that this is what's going on. So that way, as you're going through your life, when you start having experiences and you look back on them and you are trying to learn, what you're going to start doing, just because you're listening to me right now, I mean, it's inevitable, it will happen. You are going to be thinking about the context in which those things happened, those experiences happened. You're going to be thinking about your worldview and what you heard before that, what your expectations were going into that experience, and how that helps form and basically becomes the framework that helps you put those experiences into your memory in a way that's meaningful to you. After the experience is over, what value judgments do you assign to the experience that you had? How do you categorize it in your mind? Pay attention to that and begin to allow your attention to kind of guide you to be more conscious of how you choose to feel about your experiences, what you choose to take from them. And as you're paying more attention, more choice will kind of open up to you. In fact, just by paying attention, just by having awareness, you already have more choice. Because now you can stop and think, well, is this what I really want that experience to mean? One thing that I've done recently is I'll pay attention to when I'm reading a book or watching a video or something. And if I run into something that I disagree with, I'll try to think about, well, what if it was true? What if it's true that whatever this person's saying? I might disagree with it, but what if I'm wrong? And even though I don't really believe that I'm wrong, I think being aware of the fact that I automatically have these kind of assumptions, having the awareness of that means that I can stop and and think about it again. And sometimes, if I get into the habit of doing that, sometimes I'm going to run into experiences where I feel like, oh, I was wrong. My expectation was wrong. What I thought to be true isn't. So that's something that I do. And in fact, I'll give you a little tip. Um, I've studied a lot of body language, and one thing that I've found to be really interesting about body language is actually, rather than observing other people's body language, just observing your own can tell you a lot about your values and what you care about. For example, one time I learned that when somebody's lying to you and you think they're lying, if you're kind of picking up on it, you might have this inclination to rub your ear. And if you're watching a video where you disagree with the person that's talking in the video, you might kind of feel like your eyebrow itches or something around your eye, and you'll reach your hand up and kind of scratch your face. And in fact, even when you're saying something that you're not quite sure about, a lot of times you'll reach up and scratch your nose or your upper lip. And the reason that I heard for this is that when we're kids, a lot of times what we'll do when we're encountering information that either we don't like or we disagree with, we'll cover our ears or cover our eyes, or if we're lying but we don't want to be found out, we'll cover our mouth. And it's just a holdover from being a child. And I don't know if that's really why, but I've noticed this to be true in my own life. And when I'm watching a video that I disagree with, what I used to do is I would just turn off the video. And, if my eye started itching and I noticed myself scratching my eyebrow or whatever, I would just turn off the video and go watch something else. Or if I'm reading a book and same experience, I just close the book and go read something else. But lately, I've been trying to pay attention to when that happens. And rather than just close the book and give up, try to understand what it is about what I'm reading or watching or hearing that I don't like. Or if I'm the one that's saying something and I notice myself kind of covering my mouth unconsciously, if it suddenly becomes conscious, I notice myself doing it, then I'll think about, well, what is it? Is it that I'm saying something that's not true? Or am I hearing something that's not true? Or does it just not match my experience and I disagree with it for some reason? And if so, why? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I can use this opportunity to grow. So I think that's the key to how we grow, is by paying attention. And in fact, I think that you can't really help but do it, because I've already been talking about this for, this entire podcast about paying attention. And so now you are going to be thinking about it. In fact, a lot of people that I've told that body language tip to find that really interesting. And so it sticks in your mind. And in fact, that's actually another key to learning and growing, is to pay attention to those moments in time that you find to be really interesting. And one thing that I'll try to do throughout this podcast is I'll try to bring up little anecdotes and stories about my life and try to make a point through analogy, metaphor, and try to make things a little bit more interesting than just saying facts. Because I've found that when when information comes to you in a story format or something that has some emotional attachment to it, it tends to be a lot more interesting and allows you to pay more attention. And when you pay more attention, then it sticks in your brain and eventually changes your expectations about reality, which, when coupled with the experiences that you have that end up matching that expectation, eventually changes your brain so that you begin expecting the same thing more and more. And in the case of growing and changing and becoming a better person, that's a good thing. So that's about all I wanted to say about that. I hope that helps. Like I said, as I continue with this podcast, I'm going to try to take these steps and kind of integrate them into the podcast by, one, giving expectations about what I'm about to teach and how you're going to see that in your life and how you'll begin to be more aware of what I'm talking about as you go through your life and have experiences that match it. And two, I'm going to integrate a lot more relatable stories and anecdotes so that the topic is interesting enough to stay in your brain long enough for you to be more aware, so that when those similar experiences happen to you in your life, you'll have that expectation already built up that hopefully helps you see that experience in a different light. So, again, that's all I wanted to say about that. Thanks for listening. This is Andrew Fisher signing off.